all high-level boxers spar. There's no better way to prepare practitioners for the ring's grueling conditions, and pugilists have recognised this for generations. Back in 1914, Lynch's The Complete Boxer instructed those training for some competition or match to do as much sparring as they could, while Ostianov's 2020 book stresses improving technical and tactical mastery through free and conditioned sparring. Training methods vary wildly across regions, yet sparring is a universal inclusion. But the culture surrounding sparring varies wildly depending on each country you're in, and that's exactly what we'll explore today. In part 1, I examined sparring in countries like Mexico, the US and UK, so go check that out. But now it's time to expand our research. This video is based upon generalizations. Sparring culture can obviously change from gym to gym, but let's look at the broad stereotypes within each country. And anyways, thanks for watching, leave a like for the algorithm. Grouping Russia and the former Soviet states together, the consensus seems to be that sparring was, and still is, very structured and intense. Valentin Ostianov, a scientific consultant for the Ukrainian national boxing team, notes, "Boxing makes sufficient demands on the system of oxygen supply. The biggest changes in the cardiovascular and respiratory systems are caused by sparring, free fights, and punch bag work." With Ostianov educated in the Soviet Union, we can gauge this sort of mindset. Sparring is deployed ruthlessly, with boxers reprimanded if they don't continuously throw punches. Spar sessions can be entirely dedicated solely to infighting, with boxers engaged in prolonged matchups, constantly exchanging hits. Ostianov routinely alludes to technical and controlled sparring, and although cardio intensive, the practitioners rarely use 100% of their power, probably closer to 50%. With professional boxing banned in the Soviet Union, the style developed with the aim of winning points in Olympic bouts, perhaps explaining why output is prioritized over raw power. Considering this, the exceptional gas tanks of pugilists like Usyk, Triple G, Bivol and Beterbiev makes more sense. Interestingly, the fighters practice defensive work, with one fighter sporting headgear while the other throws testing shots at their head. So the approach is more meticulous, scientific, and somewhat cautious when it comes to inflicting long-term damage. I therefore score it as a 5 out of 10 on the brutality scale. The Philippines has a rich boxing culture, with fighters known for their brawling, aggressive style. The best known, Manny Pacquiao, recounts his sparring experience at L&M Gym in the Quiapo area of Manila. The place was so oppressive that trainers compared it to sparring in a sauna. 8 rounds at L&M was like going for 12 in a regular joint. You could not breathe, one regular told me. The overall intensity of Filipino spars is further showcased by Pacquiao's performances in infamous spar sessions, with a gym buddy stating, "It hurt, right here, never felt that kind of pain. It made me trip over my feet. Headgear came over my eyes, still hurts." See, Pacquiao embodies the brutal intensity of Filipino sparring. It's treated ultimately like a real fight. Reviewing footage, the sparrers tend to be front-footed, landing short hooks with maximum power. There's aggression behind the shots, with little real regard for the boxer's health. But ultimately, one thing unites top Filipino boxers like Pancho Villa, Seferino Garcia, Flash Elordi, and Pacquiao, and it's the intense poverty they were all born into. These guys know what it feels like to have nothing, and will understandably scrap at 100% to secure a better future. English-born Filipino boxer John Marvin, upon training with the Philippine boxing national team, noted that some spars turned into some mad wars in the ring, citing poverty as a key factor behind the competitiveness. Based upon this, I'd give the Philippines an 8 out of 10 on the brutality scale. It's intense, but not quite as ego-driven or toxic as some other places. Mayweather Gym. I covered the UK's cautious approach in sparring in the last part, but let's examine Ireland to see if there's any difference despite geographical proximity. John Kavanagh, Conor McGregor's MMA coach, writes, "Conor was very eager to make an impression in his first sparring session at SBG. As a result, he dropped Owen Roddy with a big body shot. That wasn't the way we did things in sparring at SBG, but I decided to let it slide. Yet this caution perhaps doesn't portray the full picture. Kavanagh's teacher and mentor background likely makes him more predisposed to technical sparring. Instead, Roger Anderson's The Fighting Irish points to Steve Collins as embodying Irish spars, labelling it rough-hewn and undisciplined, with fighters swarming and wading in. Watching Collins take on John Beckles in a 1980s amateur match, we begin to see what he means. This is further mirrored in older IABA footage, with Irish teenagers pummeling each other in violent spar sessions. Now, I feel the combination of Ireland's strong bare-knuckle boxing culture, which persists to this day, along with what author Patrick Myler describes as an inbuilt refusal to back down when the gauntlet is dropped, has largely shaped Irish spars. The people are naturally tough and are often ready to brawl if needed. Kavanagh interestingly cites the reaction of Irish boxers when he tells them to take sparring easy. At first, they're confused. Their philosophy is the harder you spar, the more prepared you are when the time comes to fight. This somewhat explains the macho mindset of many young men, not just in Ireland, but the tide seems to be turning slightly. Ireland's sparring practice is probably at a bit of a crossroads between traditional scrapping and modern technicality. This at least looks to be the case in a Reddit sparring video from Smithfield Boxing in Dublin around 5 years ago. It gets a 6 on the brutality scale. Next, Australia. For a country where the sport seems to be rapidly growing, the sparring still appears to be in a developmental phase. Michael Winkler's book, Grimish, records American boxer Joe Grimm's visit to Australia in 1908, which saw him spar both fighters before the infamous Jack Johnson against Tommy Burns matchup. This is where Australian sparring culture began, born out of Australian machismo, which saw ferocious knockdowns effectively become the norm. In more recent times, the sparring practice has become fractured, with Armenian-born Australian boxer Vic Darchinyan falling into the brutal bracket, while heavyweight Justice Honey's spar footage seems more technical and measured. Interestingly, Opetaya's sparring practice, from what I've gathered, underlines the confusing contradiction between technical and overly hard spar sessions down under.
Sparred Jai Opetaya right before his main fight, got an absolute hiding.
Yeah.
I think my head was touching my ass. He hit me so many times in there. Right, and he'll never say it like that. That's why he's such a good dude. But he bashed the of me for that.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Overall, I get the impression that it's very fight dependent, so if boxers are close to being involved in a boxing match, the sparring tempo is seriously ramped up, and this can of course lead to accidents, like Justice Honey being brutally knocked down. My Australian friend Mitch, who predominantly focuses on MMA, usefully notes that gyms have different cultures, with some prioritising pushing limits, even when injured, while others concentrate on safety and controlled sessions. Meanwhile, my friend Avi, who predominantly focuses on boxing, echoes the inconsistent sentiment, with a mixture of slugging and technique being the norm. Consequently, I feel it can be brutal, but not on every occasion. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Finally, let's cover Thailand. With my own experience being limited to one singular day in a Thai gym about 5 years ago, I feel my good friend Olly Dobson is better placed to comment on the culture. Aside from running a men's personal branding business, linked down below, Olly has routinely sparred in Thai gyms over the past 2 years, and he's duly noticed this about sparring etiquette.
But when you're sparring, it's very playful, and it kind of goes with the Thai culture in general, which is about relaxing. They say sabai, and I've had it before when I've trained in Thailand. I've trained all over Thailand. I've trained in the Netherlands with Dutch kickboxing. I've trained in the UK. With the Thai gyms in particular, I've had it a number of times when I've been sparring, and I didn't think I was going that hard, and my opponent didn't either. Maybe we're going like 50-60%, and the Thai coach will go to you, no power, like relax, relaxed. And that was a big contrast that I found when I trained in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. They were so aggressive with the way that they trained. It was just a completely different philosophy. It was a lot more like, I would say, ego driven. I mean, I respect it, you know, they're tough guys, but it seemed a little bit more ego driven and unnecessary. It's a lot more relaxed. Now, don't get me wrong, they do spar harder at times. Obviously, you have to, right? You can't just go light all the time and then only go hard in the ring. And this is what the Dutch will say, like, well, yeah, if you're preparing for a fight, you need to fight at full pace, and the Thais will do that.
Now, obviously, Olly is primarily touching upon Muay Thai, but the same applies to boxing over there. Sitting 6th in the number of boxing champions list and boasting former greats like Khalsay Galaxy, Pongsaklek Wongjongkam and Pone Kingpech. Sorry about that pronunciation. The region still has a strong boxing culture. Based upon this, I'd score the brutality a 3 out of 10, mainly as the Thais have mastered the controlled technical side effectively out of necessity, with many of its practitioners sparring frequently throughout a week. To ensure the longevity of its fighters, it tends to be more relaxed. But now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Which of you have sparred in these countries mentioned, and have I been accurate in my assessment? Have I missed the boat entirely? Let me know down in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video and haven't managed to catch part 1, I highly recommend you do so. Link to it will be down in the description below and at the end of this video. If this video gets 1,500 likes, I will endeavour to make a part 3, although we are running out of countries to cover a bit at this stage. Genuinely, thank you so much for watching, guys. Please continue to support me on this channel by liking and subscribing. More content will be on its way very soon, so keep an eye out for that. I want to say thank you to those who helped me with the making of this video. Links are down below, check them out. And yeah, that's everything. Thank you very much, guys. All the best. Cheers.